This next conversation is between Jeff and I when he called me from the prison.
I don't want to get serious and morbid and all that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah. But I do want to get some things straight, if it's okay with you. One thing I wanted to share with you. Remember that small wooden box? Yeah, you know what was in it, don't you?
The death toll in Milwaukee's mass murder is estimated at 17 tonight.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a North Side apartment, and now they wonder if they've uncovered some kind of death factory.
I was so wrapped up in what I was doing.
Hazardous material teams had been called to remove a human skull found in one refrigerator. 2 more bodies found in a freezer.
Just a real obsession. I was going to continue doing that for the rest of my life.
Police have arrested 31-year-old Jeffery Dahmer.
He's being called the cannibal killer. Our authorities continue the gruesome chore of identifying...
Your personality is, you know, loving, kind. You show respect to people. You show no kind of anger at all.
And I want you to know I love you so very much, and I care about you.
Same here. Okay, Dad.
In trying to make sense of the things his son had done, Lionel later recorded his conversations with Jeffrey in prison. He's talking to the person he probably trusts more in the world than anyone. And it may be the first real glimpse we get of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Unlike most of my friends, I wasn't in the States when the story broke that Jeff Dahmer was arrested. I was in Europe, and I had a long trip ahead of me on the train, and I bought a newspaper, and there's a photograph of a house. And it caught my attention because I said, that's the Dahmer house. Why is there a photo in this paper I just bought? And the caption underneath says, the house in which Mr. Dahmer has admitted to his first murder. And I thought, Jeff's dad killed somebody. And then I read the first paragraph, and I felt like I was sinking through the seat. I just felt like I was sinking all the way down through the floor of the train, all the way down to the rail. And I couldn't imagine this. It just was incomprehensible. How did this happen? What went on? Why did he kill these guys? You just couldn't even make sense out of it. You couldn't comprehend anything like that. It was very difficult. My name's Mike Kukrall, and I knew Jeffrey Dahmer as a classmate in school, probably since 7th grade in 1972 at Eastview Junior High School when I was 13 years old. Well, I grew up in the town of Richfield, Ohio, which is next to Bath, and it's about 30 miles out of Cleveland, Ohio. And the Dahmers lived in Bath, and I lived in Richfield, but it's the same high school. We all went to the same high school. I remember the area where Jeff lived, where he grew up. It's a pretty area. Part of it is the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. It's our only national park in Ohio. I knew the house really well. The Dahmer house was where my piano teacher lived before the Dahmers moved in there. And it was a 1950s modern house. It was a really cool house. It's still there. And it was in a wooded area on the hillside. And we were all 12, 13 years old. in 7th grade, and that's where I met Jeff Dahmer. I remember him sitting at a table in the library. He was always reading. He was one of those really shy kids at that age. But I'd talk to him and say hi and, see what he was reading. He liked to read fantasy, fiction, stuff like that. And he'd always be reading a paperback, and he held them really close to his face. That's something I remember. Junior high school is just such a group of kids that are all thrown together at a really awkward age, and all of a sudden you got to be there with everybody, and you're not really a kid anymore, but you're not yet really a teenager. You're somewhere in between. And Jeff seemed sort of like a lonely kid, but he participated in stuff. He did things.
What did you enjoy doing most with me? Tennis, fishing in the pond. Let's see. What did you enjoy least doing with me? Homework. Yeah.
Jeff's dad, Mr. Dahmer, as we called him, he came to the school. He came to school events. He would come to a band concert. He came, of course, to tennis matches. And so he's somebody I thought, oh, that's Jeff's dad over there. He was just one of the fathers. At that age, you don't pay much attention to people's parents. But a lot of dads were quiet in those days, They didn't get totally involved with their kids' school activities like they do now. They worked and they came home. So you didn't see them around as much as people do now. Later, I learned he was a chemist. I didn't know that when I was in high school. I don't think it was a close relationship. I think his father took interest in what his son was doing, but I don't think it was the type where there was a lot of hugging and that type of close relationship. But I didn't know Jeff's mom at all.
What did you enjoy doing most with Joyce? Let's see. I guess just coming home from school, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And the least? I know these are hard to answer. The arguments.
My name's Dan Kraft. I'm a retired FBI agent at 31 years with the FBI, working nothing but violence, violent crimes. Jeff told me his father, Lionel, was a PhD chemist, brilliant, but he wasn't there for him, okay? Growing up, he might be there, but emotionally wasn't there. And then he traveled a lot, so physically he wasn't there. Jeff didn't have that role model.
I can remember calling, and I don't know if I might have even been away at work. Out of town.
His mother had a lot of mental, emotional problems. She was an alcoholic, didn't care, for Jeff.
Well, I don't know what I did. I don't know what caused the bitterness.
Jeff had a younger brother, David. Jeff ended up resenting David because his mother favored David, would show him the love. And I found that to be, abusive. He just didn't feel that he mattered. So that can be very powerful, especially for a child in those formative years. If you don't think mama loves you, it can be pretty devastating.
How come I didn't know about these things? Because I don't think Joyce and I knew nothing about that. And I guess perhaps we were so engulfed in our, in physical and mental problems and our fighting and so forth that perhaps we didn't focus on
on something that should have been focused on.
Early on, he was a good student. He worked well in school, worked hard, probably to please his dad or his parents, I don't know.
You know, that 4-H project was a lot of fun. We both did that.
Oh, we used to have fun with the chickens, the lambs, and then we used to go on those long hikes with the hiking sticks. Yeah, that's right. And all the moths that used to come towards the window, and we used to catch those. We had quite a collection there. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
He was in my biology class, and I know that's a class he really liked. And Jeff was one of the better students in it, I'd say. He seemed more interested when we started, dissecting frogs and things. And I always thought maybe this kid, he's going to go to medical school or something because he seemed to like biology. Outside of school, I remember him going fishing with a few guys in a little pond, and they were supposed to throw the fish back. And Jeff took out a knife and cut a fish all open that he caught. And they're like, "What are you doing? You were supposed to throw them back." And he said he wanted to see what it looked like inside. But that's what Jeff Dahmer was like.
In 1991, I was a beat reporter at the Milwaukee Journal newspaper. Covering the cops and the courts beat for a large daily newspaper was absolutely my dream. I would call in sick for my waitressing shift so that I could ride along with the officers. I really wanted to learn. To me, that was the best beat in the newsroom and the best job, because you're seeing behind the curtain. You're getting to see the way that law enforcement really works. And I would listen to the scanners, and I would go out to crime scenes. I would go around to police district stations and get to know the officers, made sure they knew me so that if I showed up at a crime scene, they would know me. So I would say that I was a person of trust. But I also was incredibly annoying because I was a reporter and I wanted to know. It's like a 2-year-old, when children always say, why? But that's what I always wanted to know. I always wanted to know what was behind the reasons that police did what they do. So that, I think, was a positive, but also contributed to me being almost the annoying little sister that they couldn't get rid of.
Police made the gruesome discovery shortly before midnight in the low-income apartment complex where the suspect lived alone in a small second-floor apartment.
I got a phone call on a landline at my home before midnight on July 22nd, 1991, from a police officer who said, "There's a guy here, and it looks like he's been saving body parts in his apartment." So I went to the scene. I didn't really know what to think. Milwaukee is this nice, quiet Midwestern town where, as people always say in these kinds of stories, nothing ever happens. But like a lot of big cities, there were pockets. Dahmer lived in an area that was not known as a safe neighborhood. When I get to the scene, there aren't that many police there yet. It's very, very early. And standing in the hallway was an officer that I knew well, and he was standing, his head was back up against the wall, and he had his hands on his head. I got to the door of Dahmer's apartment. It was apartment number 213. And I stepped over the threshold, just kind of peeked in. And it didn't look like some kind of a torture chamber or anything odd. It looked like a single guy's apartment. Now, it smelled. The smell was there. This was kind of chemical. It was like, is something, something rotting? I can't really describe it. But it's nothing that I could have said, ah. Then there's the bedroom. And the bedroom was really, that was the Chamber of Horrors. With Polaroids of victims in various stages of dismemberment. With a barrel where Dahmer was trying to melt the bones or to destroy the bones. A closet where he had a skeleton hanging. I know that there are detectives and police officers who worked that scene that night who absolutely don't speak about it anymore because they saw things that they can't get rid of.
My name is Michael Dubas. After 34 years on the police department, this is the very first time that I have spoken before cameras about Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, about what I saw, about what I lived through. It just seems to be the right time. As I entered the apartment, I looked up at the officer and he said, "Go look in the refrigerator." I opened up the door and I see a human head in a small cardboard box in the bottom of the refrigerator. I was a 31-year-old young man with 2 years of experience on homicides. To see something like that, just understanding what it would take to do that to another person, it was a shock. As we're searching this apartment, each drawer we open, each box we open is more unique, is more startling. There was a short 2-file drawer cabinet. And when you opened up that first drawer, there were 3 human skulls in there. There were human bones. There were some big, long leg bones, ribs, all sorts of stuff. As we moved our way through the bedroom, there is a closet directly across from the bedroom door. We opened up the closet and there were 2 more skulls in there. There was a large, as I would call it, a stew pot. We pulled the stew pot out of the closet and took the cover off. There were 2 human hands, obviously appeared to be from an African-American male, and a pubic mound and penis. In total, I recovered 84 Polaroids from that apartment. From looking at those pictures, one man's stomach had been filleted open. One man was hanging from the shower nozzle in the bathroom, obviously dead. These were all human beings that had been murdered. At that point, it was just a terrible, terrible place to be. As the investigation moves along, and at some point the sun is up, probably after 5 o'clock in the morning, and the phone starts ringing.
I was phoning you very often on July 22nd.
And it rings, and it rings, and it rings.
I called and called. Each time I called, I let it ring many times.
And I wondered to myself, here we have a guy who lives here all by himself, no signs of family living in the apartment with them, I pick up the phone. This is Detective Dubas, how can I help you?
He said that his exact words were, "We're investigating a homicide here."
Lionel Dahmer had only just seen his son's apartment building on the national news and wanted to know if he was all right.
And I said, well how does that, what does that have to do with Jeff, is what I said.
And I assured Lionel that his son was all right. He wasn't hurt. But any more information than that, I told him that he had been taken down to the police station and was being talked to by detectives.
And he said that he would have someone call me back. I was really down. And I'll be honest with you, this is not an easy time for me. But I'm not going to cry, you know. I just want you to know that, though, Jeff. Okay?
We already had our suspect in custody. It was our job then to try and figure out who all the victims were. So we really needed cooperation.
31-year-old Jeffery Dahmer is reportedly cooperating with investigators trying to identify victims found in his apartment turned morgue.
I was a lieutenant of detectives with Milwaukee Police Department. I was assigned to the homicide unit at the time that Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested in 1991. He was very willing to talk. He made that very clear to us from the start, that he wanted to tell us everything. He said he was tired of the hiding and the lying, and that he was going to come straight forward. He knew he was caught.
I just want to see things cool down, and
I know.
sure this was a big bang in the head for me too.
Well, I understand that.
When you sat down and talked to Jeffrey Dahmer, came across like an everyday Joe. He very soft-spoken. He talked well. His grammar was good. You know, he had a tremendous memory. I mean, he gave tremendous detail of everything. And he said all these things very matter-of-factly. Well, he was asked about his upbringing, and you know, he even talked about some stuff in high school that he did, and the information he gave us was so accurate. He was able to go back 13 years and give that type of detail.
By high school, he was over 6 feet and broad-shouldered, big blonde-haired guy, and he lifted weights and he played tennis. So, you know, he was not like somebody you'd throw around. In those days, I'd say that the high school was like the center of everybody's social life, because when you were home, there wasn't much to do. And we didn't grow up in a place where you could walk to your friends' houses usually. You had to either get a ride or someone gave you a ride or whatever. Going to the Dahmer house, which I didn't do too often, but I'd stop by there a few times. Didn't really go inside, but I heard that his parents really didn't get along, so it was like not a house you would go in and hang out with your friends there, because other kids lived right on that same street, and they would say, oh, his parents fight all the time. You can hear them yelling. There's always yelling and hollering going on, and so, you know, it's not a place you want to go when you're a teenager.
Did she vent her anger on you, Jeff?
Well, you know how she could get when she
Yes,
gets really angry.
You bet. And
Teeth-gritting angry.
I think I know the answer, but I just wanted to ask you. Now, if you know exactly what I'm talking about then, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
When something didn't go her way, she transferred her anger to me. Now, multiply that incident by 1,000-fold, and that's what I went through.
Yeah, I know. I was living it too. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember.
I'd say sophomore, junior years, he seemed to open up a little more, Jeff Dahmer, and he was open to doing crazy things and getting attention from people. And in that sense, several of us sort of started what, it never really was anything official at all, but it's something we called the Dahmer Fan Club. And we just seeing things he did that were goofy and funny, and that was more in high school, like 9th, 10th grade, I'd say. He always made us laugh. He was a funny guy. He would imitate people. He was really good at imitating people behind their backs. But he also had like spasms that he'd do just to, I don't know, I guess to get attention. And people would say doing a Dahmer when he did something crazy like that. I was standing by my locker in high school. It's real loud, real noisy, locker doors slamming, kids running back and forth, getting to class. And Jeff Dahmer was going down the hall, and he just sort of leaned over towards me, and he put his head on my chest, and for about 5 seconds, and he said, "I just want to listen to your heartbeat. I just wanted to make sure you're still alive." And then he just went on his way. But he could do things like that and be funny about it and get away with it. Always got away with stuff.
My name is Eric Hickey. I'm a criminal psychologist. There are many young men like Dahmer who just don't fit in, but he had low self-esteem. And so Jeffrey was the class clown at school because he wanted attention. He wanted people to like him. And yet he was awkward and didn't know how to fit in. And so he was lonely. He was probably very sad. When I met his mother and interviewed her, Joyce, and I remember the very first thing she said to me as we sat down in her living room. She said, "You know, Jeffrey never tried to hurt anybody. He killed them, but he never tried to hurt them."
I never thought that you killed animals. No, I didn't. I had my bow and arrow pointing at a red feather that I lured back. But when it looked at me with those limpid brown eyes, yeah, such big, trusting eyes, I just couldn't do it, no way.
As he gets older, he's got feelings that he believes that he's gay. He has fantasies about sex because he liked muscular men.
Then when did you have fantasies about, when did you think about males? Well, ever since I was active that way. I don't know why it's that way. All I know is that it's that way for some reason. I don't understand it any more than anybody else.
He tried to do things that would be what other kids are doing, like take a date to prom. And the more that he tries to fit in, the worse it gets for him. And he is going into a very bizarre world that he's creating in his head.
What was the very first fantasy, I was wondering, that you can remember having, which you thought to yourself was kind of odd or disturbing?
As Jeffrey was going through puberty, of course, he was masturbating, and he would masturbate to his fantasies. He probably has some very unusual fantasies.
The first one I can remember is having an interest in those dead dogs on the side of the road, cutting them open and finding out what's inside of them.
He started to explore things that are not normal, like animals, and think about animals.
So that was the first that you can remember that you had a fantasy about looking at the inside of animal remains. Right, and then graduated to what it's graduated to.
He was examining roadkills, He not just looked at them scientifically, but he was looking at them sexually. Right? And as he did that, I think he started to masturbate about those roadkills.
You did go cruising around in your bicycle? Yeah. Your roadkills, right?
He specifically picked up roadkills because he was exploring their bodies. And by exploring their bodies, he also explored their sexual organs. And that became arousing to him.
One time I stuck that deep-skinned dog shit on the stake. One of the guys in high school. Mm-hmm. They figured that I had probably done it because it was closest to my property.
Yeah, and I think as he went through that process, and his low self-esteem, he wanted to feel powerful. And for Jeffrey to be powerful, he had to be in control.
Jeffrey Dahmer is evolving now into the monster that he eventually becomes. His father was trying all ways available to try and figure out if he had a role in this.
I am making a parallel with my early childhood. Oh, really? Yeah. I think you'll find it very interesting when I get done with it. Yeah, I hope so.
He doesn't see that his son is becoming an extremely dangerous person.
There are things that I have never told you, and haven't told the world, and there are some very interesting parallels. All these thoughts are pretty weird. I imagine it would take digesting. Well, no, I had weird thoughts too in my childhood. You're just like me, Jeff.
Milwaukee police tell us they are being flooded with phone calls from families that fear a missing loved one is among the victims of the killer.
As the news broke that day, I recall getting phone calls at my desk from family members, and each one of these calls was then presented to Jeffrey Dahmer. It says, does any of this sound familiar? Might you have been here? Might you have talked to this person?
What went through your mind when you first heard the news about the mass murders?
Right away I thought of my brother. Right away I thought of my brother.
We looked at every single missing report we had. Went back and talked to every parent or every spouse.
I don't want to think the worst. I just want to think that he's someplace where he doesn't call or hasn't called for some reason, and that he'll let us know that he's alive somewhere.
Those families are all suffering. Children, women and girls, men, grandmothers. All those families are feeling those same pains.
I keep having dreams about Earl.
What kind of dreams?
He's calling me for help. And every time I get to him, he just disappeared.
All we could really tell them at that point is that we believe, based on the suspect's story and based on items that were found in the apartment, that your loved one might have been one of those victims.
Because there's no way for any family or any family member to be going through this. You know, we're trying to keep our heads together and keep strong and just, you know, be strong.
One thing about Jeff Dahmer, in our senior year, he started drifting away from us all. We really didn't see him too much. He didn't hang around with us. There was a descent into his own world, I'd say, and less sociable, less involved with things, less caring about school. I think our senior year, he failed a lot of classes. He did graduate, but he just didn't care about things anymore. One thing I did hear my senior year was that his parents were getting divorced.
I
I distinctly remember the day when she left. Do you know that damn water pump that kept going on the fridge?
Yeah, kept getting waterlogged.
That happened just before she was about to take off, and she was all upset about that. Really, really upset about that. Angry that I couldn't get it fixed.
Angry that you couldn't get it fixed?
Huh? Yeah, that it was delaying her plan. I finally got it fixed, I think, and then
I know.
That wasn't one of her better days, let's put it that way.
Finally, Lionel and Joyce are divorced. Joyce has left with Jeffrey's younger brother, David. Lionel has moved out to a motel. So he goes from being a kid who's abandoned emotionally to being actually abandoned, to being left by himself. And for someone with the kinds of fantasies and thoughts that Jeffrey Dahmer was having, alone is not a good place.
I'm sorry that it was such a horrible existence right around the time of your graduation. It was just awful, Jeff.
The last time I saw Jeff when it was at a party and he had a good time and you were just, no problems and that was it. And then, it was getting late and I thought I better get home. But I decided to stay on the back road instead of going on the main road. And I see somebody walking on the road. And as I got close, it's Jeff Dahmer. So I stopped because he's got a couple miles to go yet. And I say, hey, you want to ride? And he gets in the car right away. And I give him a ride to his house. The house is all dark, but why shouldn't it be all dark? It's after midnight. So I assumed everybody was asleep. I didn't really realize he was living there alone. And so we sat there, and I remember talking to him a little bit in my car late at night, but he didn't have much to say. And I said, well, I'll see you later, I guess. And he got out of the car and went in his house, this dark house. And that's the last time I ever saw Jeff Dahmer. And that's about the time of his first kill.
Jeff told me about his fantasies, and it was fantasies of killing and having sex with the dead body.
Remember that jogger you said that you saw?
He saw a jogger, and he fantasized about killing this person.
Was the jogger, was he tall or short?
He was, I'd say maybe 5'10", slender build.
Mm-hmm. And did he have hair? Lots of hair?
Yeah.
That was very powerful for him. And he would tell me that it was like a continuous reel, playing over and over again.
Where did you first see him?
I was just riding down to the Lawson store and happened to see him, and then I got the idea in my head and waited.
So Jeff sat and waited for him one day.
And then you got the idea of going back with a bat, and you went back once, huh?
Yeah, just once.
And then that particular day, the jogger didn't come by. So Jeff was very disappointed because he couldn't act on his fantasy.
Okay.
Didn't show up.
And then he didn't show up. And why did you abandon the idea after?
It was too dangerous, too much alcohol.
So he started fantasizing about picking up a hitchhiker. Sometimes when evil meets with opportunity, you have a formula for somebody dying.
The year is 1978. Jeffrey Dahmer is 18 years old, and he's driving down the street and he sees a hitchhiker, who is Stephen Hicks, who is on his way home from a rock concert.
And I was just driving back from the mall to have a few beers at home, and he was right there by the fire station.
Stephen Hicks takes a ride from Jeffrey Dahmer, which will turn out to be a fatal decision.
that 1 week when everything was, when the circumstances were all right, lo and behold, what do I see? Just that one time, that 1 week. Never again did I see anybody like that. It's almost like it was prearranged by someone, huh? It's just so weird. I don't know what to think. Someone or something.
Jeffrey Dahmer picks him up and invites him to come over to the house. And Stephen Hicks does. They are sitting and talking. Jeffrey is attracted to him. And now Stephen Hicks wants to leave.
What's important here is when Stephen wanted to leave, Jeff didn't want to be abandoned again. His father abandoned him, his mother abandoned him. So he didn't want Stephen. Plus he had these fantasies of killing. So it's a perfect storm.
Jeffrey grabs the closest thing he has, which is a barbell, and hits Stephen Hicks in the head, killing him. Did Dahmer really want to kill Stephen Hicks? It's not clear, but what we do know is he did not want Stephen Hicks to leave. Initially, he gets rid of Stephen Hicks' body under the house, in a crawl space. Eventually, he dismembers his body and places the remains inside garbage bags and puts that in the back of the car, decides he's going to drive it to the dump.
As he was driving, and it's late at night, and he drives a little bit weaving, a little left of center. He had been drinking with Stephen Hicks. So a cop stops him.
This is the first of what will be a number of encounters with law enforcement that Jeffrey Dahmer will successfully evade.
Sees the trash bag in the back seat and asks Jeff about it.
He is very personable. That's the thing about Jeffrey Dahmer and about a lot of serial killers. Very personable and very manipulative with that personality.
So Jeff says, my parents are divorcing. They left. I'm left home alone. I'm depressed. I'm upset. I decided to take a ride to the dump. I've got some trash in the back, and I just want to go to the dump. Something to do. And, you know, the cop believed him. Gives him a ticket and on her way.
With the murder of Stephen Hicks, Jeffrey Dahmer is now on a path to become a serial murderer. His father has no idea of the extent of how troubled his son is.
Did the series of fantasies later on in life, did they develop? Yeah, over the years they got stronger and stronger, more oppressive, I guess the word is, continuous. Couldn't shake them. And it was just a real obsession.
Jeffrey Dahmer, he's tormented, he's tortured by these fantasies. But they're just not going away.
My name is Billy Joe Capshaw. I joined the Army in 1979. He and my roommate was Jeffrey Dahmer. I started to plan his death. I was going to kill Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer. And now I feel guilty about it. I should have took him out before he got out of hand.